Снова здравствуйте, с вами Соня Альтерман.
Hello once again, this is Sonia Alderman, this is the chief editor of Ssswarz, and now we continue our discussion what our office spaces should look like to make sure they work effectively, to be in line with new requirements and be safe at the same time. And is it possible with architecture to do our space and environment more creative, to help us take more creative decisions? This is the topic of presentation of our next presenter. He's the founder of Hush Studios, and his goal is to think how to inspire people with architecture to be more creative, to make some extraordinary out-of-the-box solutions.
Консалтинг таких бюро, как Google.
Hush Bureau works with such huge companies as Instagram, Google, Nike, Zaha Hadid. So, David, I will be very happy to hear how Instagrammable is office and how can we create proper attitude towards work.
Thank you, everyone. I appreciate it. Thanks for the introduction. I'm here to talk about this wow effect in architecture. And I believe architecture already can wow, but the idea of digital experience in the office and in architecture at large can often add this layer of inspiration and potential and wow that can differentiate companies, organizations, and the built environment. So first, as was introduced, I run a company called Hush, based in New York, and we really are here to design ways where organizations can better express the mission of their company, like what their purpose is, what they intend to do, so that their people or partners can really come together around this idea of purpose and mission. And the office is a really important place for that because it's where people spent a lot of time. And so there's an opportunity to make that space really mission forward. These are some of the things that we have made so you understand the kinds of things and the kinds of spaces we're creating, the kinds of way digital experiences and artistry integrate into the architectural environment. And ultimately, I'm going to actually talk to you about a project we just completed for Uber in San Francisco, California, here in the United States. But I'm going to show you kind of other ways we've got there. So first I'm going to talk about ideas, and then we'll talk about what they mean. This wow effect is part of a large idea that involves architecture and digital together, but I'm going to focus on the digital part. And really, the wow effect means inspiration. That's all we're trying to talk about. Making you feel in awe, motivated, inspired to do something. So we believe at our company, Hush, that digital experiences inspire people through shared rituals and align them around a shared purpose. So you can create things with digital experiences that feel part of the purpose and ritual of a company. And in a way, if you want to inspire people, especially through digital experiences, you need three things: scale, people, and the way they interact. And if you can do all three well, you, I think, have a chance of really inspiring people in the office or in architectural space at large. So let's start with scale. It's a conference around architects, urban planning, and the workplace. We know architecture already exists at scale, big scale. But most digital experiences don't. In fact, most of them exist at this scale. So our goal is to move people from a heads-down approach of looking at digital into a heads-up kind of idea and mindset at the scale of architecture. So simply heads down, moving to heads up. And how might that happen? And so how does digital and story and content and information go from down to up? So one project we worked on for a biotech company here in the United States was all about a net zero building, a net zero office space, site net zero. So it produced solar and it used solar energy to perform a yearly net zero energy basis. And we were asked to come up with something inspiring to help tell that story about sustainability. And we built this called the Energy Wheel. And the Energy Wheel is a 40-foot radial light sculpture that tells the story of energy. So at any given time, the light moves inward, outward, or inward to talk to you about what energy is actually being produced at any given time. So people walk around and look up and see what the building's doing. So they're inspired by the sustainability mission of the company, and they're not looking at their phone to understand this. They're simply feeling what this digital expression, this art piece, can do. We've explored similar things in many other projects that move people's positioning to a heads-up sort of idea. How you can understand a financial company and the way they trade stocks and information through a heads-up sculpture. We've looked at how you could walk into a major sport company and understand the future of sport through heads-up digital. How financial banking company might feel if everyone's working together and you understand the data of that company at scale. These are things that are all digital experiences on mission to talk about scale. The second piece is people. Architecture could exist without people. Digital experiences could exist without people, but they're basically there for people to behave and commune and operate inside of. So how do we think about people in digital experience? We use digital experience to gather people, to create rituals of interaction. And we use the 5 senses of digital experience to help people become part of a community. So for Instagram, in their San Francisco headquarters, we basically built a space that stood for Instagram's mission about creative content and a platform for creators and a platform to consume beautiful imagery of our time. And so we created a space that everyone has to work in and walk through and arrive at that involves people discovering creativity. So by walking through this space and simply touching these light columns, content from Instagram actually fills up the room and takes over this space. So as you touch each piece, a piece of content from Instagram ends up being the lighting and animation and sound in the entire room. So it's a way to pay tribute to a company's mission and organization, but it also creates a shared ritual. So everyone who walks in this space, when they walk in for the first time or the 100th time, they participate in this ritual of touching these columns and igniting the space with Instagram content. You can imagine how this might feel in the workplace for a new recruit or a new group of folks who are starting their first day at Instagram, how that special feeling of discovery could make them feel aligned with the company's mission. So there's lots of permutations, and it continues and continues, and that's why people continue to engage. What was interesting is one of our clients who just went back to the office after many months of being remote, the first thing she did was take a picture of herself inside this space as a commitment to be back at work and back in the organization. The third thing is interaction. One might argue that architecture is interactive, but in the specific nature of interaction in digital, we know that digital experiences exist almost primarily to interact, to choose, to discuss. So we think architecture is enduring, meaning it has longevity. It lasts for hundreds of years, but it can often be static. It doesn't change. What you build stays. Digital things are naturally interactive. They change. They always are new. They asked people to connect with them, to discover, to see, to look, to find. And we have to use this interaction to create inspiration. So we've played with a lot of ways that interaction can create inspiration. Simple digital interfaces and interactions that create big, bold statements and gestures. A flick of the wrist, 2 inches long of a finger, lights up 100 feet of digital sculpture to tell a story about a company. In this one, walking through a space, moving your body, discovering what's possible in interesting ways, it's a magical sensibility. These things aren't sitting still. They're asking you to participate, to discover them and look at them anew, and to see what is behind, if you will, the architectural space itself. Simple things that allow people to interact through movement just without thinking at a level of magic and inspiration that the world around them is constantly changing and may always be changing. And then, of course, there's types of interaction that are very specific, but when we're working with that level, we're trying to make those interactions unexpected, beautiful, magical, things that people want to do because we interact with this 1,000 times a day. How then do we ask people to interact to create inspiration, not function? If this is functional, we need to bring interaction in a much more expressive and artistic way when we do things in the architectural world. And so forth. Obviously, the types of interactions we think about and do range from voice to gesture to body to touch. And those are just the ways we can play and activate our world. So a big theme at the conference is the office, right? The workplace. And after a year or more of working remotely or hybrid, there's many questions about what are organizations doing with their office. And while there's very smart, functional solutions happening, there also needs to be new solutions that aren't purely function. Anyone familiar with behavioral psychology knows this triangle. It's all about the human being and how we want to live our lives and what an optimal life looks like. It's about getting to a place where you feel like you have purpose and you're here for a reason. Unfortunately, the last year and a half has focused the world and designers and architects like ourselves on the bottom, which is how are we safe mentally and physically? What do we need functionally? What needs to be clean? What needs to be distanced? What needs to be smaller? What needs to be larger? These are very important things, but they're incredibly functional. I hope that with digital experience, we move back to the upper quadrant in the workplace, in the office, which is how do we, again, want to go back to the office, maybe not in the same proportions or time, but when we go back, we need to achieve the top pieces of this hierarchy. We need to feel like we are here to be part of this company and to feel recognized. And how you do that is much different than the design and ideas we've been thinking about for the last year, which were all about safety. So my thesis really is, how do we get back to a place of inspiration in the office where we're not talking about safety only, we're talking about a higher power, a higher order, a higher level of thought. So while this project started well before the pandemic, the thesis of the project still holds. And it maybe is even more important now than it was 3 years ago when we started. This is Uber's headquarters in Mission Bay, San Francisco, California. And it's their global headquarters. So they consolidated lots of spaces they have around the Bay Area and California into a single space that could speak to all employees, align disciplines, and get people working on a single campus with a vision. We started with a lot of real important interviews and heard a lot of really critical information. You know, this company wanted to understand and share its impact on the world and people. We wanted to figure out how to connect employees to a bigger vision. You know, some people spend years working on an app or writing lines of code, but they don't always connect it to why they're doing it and what impact it will have on the people that use Uber's products and services. People who want to work there want to understand the company that they work for. They want to know why. What's your bigger purpose? Why should I work for you and not somebody else? And how do they feel part of something bigger so they can come work there? So at the same time, Uber was working on a new mission statement. And as I said to you, our whole company is about aligning with a company's mission. That's where we start. Even if we only do a small piece of that bridge to the mission, we impact that mission in any way we can. So Uber's mission is to ignite opportunity by setting the world in motion. It's a beautiful mission statement. And so we thought about, well, what does that mean? If Uber it's all about movement, then motion really connects to story. If you think about it, it's very hard to tell a story without characters moving or doing something in space. Someone has to move their lips, move their body, go from place to place. That creates a narrative. So motion really creates story. If we could make story show up in the office in a way that felt inspiring, then we would be doing our job. So we thought that story could equal light. And if we could find ways from Uber to make something light up, that would be really interesting. So the stories we sourced were ride data, city data, rider stories, driver stories, product data. These kinds of things all became little pieces of light. That was the metaphor. And that piece of light could be a story about someone just starting to drive for Uber and helping their family achieve economic stability, for example. So there's many stories of this. And you quickly see how the movement of light starts to relate to the movement of transportation and people throughout our urban landscape. And when you add that and scale it up, it starts to really work. Many, many, many lights become many, many people, become a global system that help create opportunity. So in the end, we designed the stream. The stream is a digital experience at Uber's headquarters that expresses Uber's mission and helps inspire people. And we believe that as people come back to that office, they're going to reconnect with the purpose of Uber and inspire. Of course, we studied formally how the stream could work and look from a scale, interaction, and people standpoint, the three pieces. And we ultimately ended up on this concept where light moves and becomes denser and denser and denser until it actually becomes a photorealistic story that we can see and understand and we connect with. It moves through the 6 stories of the building, through this scaffold. It cuts through the space as if collecting all the ideas and work and effort of employees filtering them down through the space overhead and resolving in the lobby where everyone enters from the CEO to a recruit, and they all feel connected to the stream. We explored artistic ways to share these stories, beautiful colorways and glitch art and animation, and how that might work. And we explored all sorts of ways that might resolve into actual content and graphics and imagery and video that tell the story of Uber and its impact on the world and people. And then we did all sorts of interaction tests for how people might interact and perceive this space, how they might feel like they're changing and they're part of the past volume of all of their, how does their presence activate it? And then we did all sorts of design tests, and this is just to show you how we think and work and the rigor through which we put our concepts through to get to a level of sort of true inspiration. So we test and we see what it feels like to understand story as light, as graphics, story as light, as typography and words and concepts, story as cities that Uber is starting in or working in. And of course, light becoming real stories of impact and change, or artistic experiences that make someone feel inspired through beauty. So this is the final space. You can see the structure is what everyone walks into every day. We took beautiful architecture made by Shop and the design and the materiality, and we worked to create a collaborative and integrated architectural digital experience that helps to tell these stories, but feels connected, feels active, feels interactive, dynamic. It's a space for people to gather, to discuss, to learn about the things that they didn't even know were happening at the company. It could happen at typography and artistry. And these are some of the videos from actually being inside the space, where you see people actually feeling a level of awe around what they do and how they feel. So this is the final video, and then we'll take some questions. Thank you all. And we can do questions now.
Да, Давид, спасибо большое.
David, Thank you very much for this incredibly bright, inspiring presentation. I think it is as inspiring as the spaces that people work in. I have some question with criticism. These spaces remind us of a museum experience, the experience that we get in today's cultural centers or museums. And it's hard to imagine that this is really a working space. And I would like to ask you, how comfortable is it to work in this environment? How much do you think about comfort? Or this is just a space where a person should get inspired and then he goes to work in some more standard workspace? Because before that, office spaces were added with some green stuff, and we would try them to make more cozy so that the person would feel at home. And now I see total lack of green things. It is very technocratic space, and it is hard to imagine for me that it would be comfortable to work 8 hours a day every day here. How could you comment on this?
It's a good question. So, of course, we're only designing pieces of an overall workplace program. So their comfort and space and light, absolutely, I wouldn't work in these spaces, right, all day. So it's not the workspace, it's part of the workplace, the overall. And so you did say what our strategy is, though. Our strategy is to design things that inspire people right when they enter and at areas around a campus so that that inspiration moves them forward, keeps them going, keeps them motivated, and keeps them focused and aligned on the purpose of the organization, of the business. What's interesting, though, you mentioned green things or biophilia and comfort-driving design pieces. Those are important, but what's interesting over the past year with us working at home, we've found ways to find comfort. We've found ways to make our own coffee, sit in our own comfortable chair, find a comfortable desk, switch locations to keep our comfort level high. So in a lot of ways, a lot of the design around comfort before the pandemic is not as much of a focus after the pandemic. I believe when people come back to the office, the focus is not about a demand for comfort. It's about a demand for inspiration. Because the things we make, you cannot do at home. You cannot feel at home because you don't have scale. You don't have peers and people, and you have no one to interact with. So that's my point. The office is a unique place to inspire because of those 3 reasons.
Да, это очень интересно, как меняется.
It is very interesting how our ideas transform about comfort in our private space and outside of it. And my last question, I will look at it from the different viewpoint. So all works that you have demonstrated are incredible and Instagrammable. I would like to take a picture of me amid this light, amid this stream that go through your body. It seems that this line between when something is done for looking good on Instagram and really inspired is very slim. What do you think about this when architects start constructing something for Instagram, but not for people who really will be in this space?
Mm-hmm. It's a very delicate line. I've actually written a few articles on this, And I believe in certain ways, we've gone far too far, where architecture is being designed solely for that rectangle on this device. Like, why would we want to take all the form and grandeur and possibility of architecture and reduce it to a frame? However, I think architects were designing buildings and spaces to be aesthetic to the eyes long before we had Instagram. So when you walk into a space and you see a beautiful symmetry or an interesting play of color in your eyes are framing a similar setup. That was a conscious move by an architect or designer to figure it out. So just because we have Instagram now to capture it doesn't mean we weren't thinking about the beauty and form of our first impression. So it's kind of a non-answer, but I think as long as we make sure that people are first in our designs, sometimes people really want to understand beauty and feel beauty, whether they have a camera or not.
Дэвид, спасибо большое за
David, thank you very much for this inspiring conversation, your presentation, and your time. I really hope that this is the last time we will be speaking online and that next time we will have face-to-face meeting in Moscow.
Love that. Thank you for having me.
Bye.